Program is sponsored by Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hi, once again, I'm Sue Rose Minahan. This is Talk Cosmos, leading edge conversations, awakening your authentic self for soul growth. And it's March 6th. Today is actually a day that Mars, our inner planet of our desires and attractions, is conjunct. That means at the same spot as Mars, our directions, our activities, and they're in this sign at 0 degrees Aquarius. In the meantime, we have two other planets conjuncting also in that process that won't happen until April, but because they're slower and further out, it's taking a little longer, and that would be Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. But for all extent and purposes, they're really powerful right now, close within the same degree. So our title here for Planet Buzz is Let Your Freak Flag Fly. Be that unique self. And there'll be a lot more in this discussion, and I look forward to it. And thank you so much for joining. Okay, we're ready for Planet Buzz.
Focusing on planetary ecliptic orbital cycles and planetary pairs called synodic cycles connecting the planets at the same degree that begin our relationship, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, from stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Leslie Francis, author of the 2019 and 2020 Llewellyn Sun Sign books, a practicing professional astrologer intuitive, a lecturer, and host of my own podcast, Coloring Outside the Box. My lifelong search to understand what it is to be human led me to develop my own approach to astrology called purpose-centered astrology. I passionately seek to support people in their greatest act of creativity, living life, through consultations and webinars. Creator of star cards, I love talking and making people laugh.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tad. I have a PhD in human science and work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with people around the world. I teach and lecture on astrology both in person and remotely. I have a blog. I have written for the Mountain Astrologer, Celestial Vibes, and Tarot.com. Additionally, I am the educational coordinator for Live Life Resources, an educational nonprofit specializing in resiliency training, education, and research.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
Well, hello, Laura. It's so great to see you. Yeah. I guess we'll miss. Yes, we'll miss Leslie. She, just to let our audience know, is on the team, but today just wasn't working there yet. So we're here once again. And I started with Laura. It's always a great treat.
Yeah, it's good. And I mean, it's lovely when Leslie's here, but life happens. So
that's it. And isn't that really, when you think about this Aquarius energy that's happened, we'll bring up a chart later. It's sudden, it's unpredictable. And in our lives, so many ways, it's just unearthing changes, many changes.
Yeah, I mean, that's this Aquarian energy that this conjunction here on the East Coast happened in the wee hours of the morning. I was not awake at 2 o'clock in the morning when this conjunction happened. But, it may have found its way into the weird dreams I had. But that Aquarian energy that is about that revolutionary energy, right? That thinking, looking at things, thinking about things in in unique ways, and unpredictable events happening that maybe, I hate to use the word force, but sort of perpetuate or necessitate a recalibration.
It is a burst of energy. It's really true. Just like that lightning associated with Uranus, that is, there's that, Rick Levine always mentions about the dynamics. Scientifically, it's a matter of ions, negative and positive, that have got to release tension, and boom, light happens. And I suppose maybe that mystery of Prometheus, who gave, in mythology, that gave fire to people, but we still don't understand really perhaps what fire is. But yes, there's
and he made humanity, right? That's part of Prometheus's story, is he made humans.
Put life into that clay object, yes, because it was just clay that could be almost like clamation, I suppose, that old process of animation where they made little clay figures, but that with the spark of life have all that we have.
Yes.
Part of the
the
source.
So that's part of that Aquarian, Aquarius and Uranus being associated with Prometheus, and the humanitarian side of Uranus Aquarius is Prometheus being the creator of humans, where his brother Epimetheus made all the other creatures on the planet. That he's responsible for humans, which is why he stole fire from the gods, because he wanted us to have something to defend ourselves from all the other creatures his brother had made.
It is a fascinating way to look back, and it suddenly makes me think, I hadn't thought of going in this direction, but the suddenness to receive, just thinking of the storyline, like if you were that clay object and suddenly you receive, it's like having consciousness, which then does lead me to realize that part of this research I'd been preparing a little bit here was this sense of awakening, because Aquarius is also awakening. And there's those stages, where we...
Yeah. And so then we combine this with this conjunction of this Mars-Venus merging that we've just had. And it's a really unusual conjunction, right? Because Mars and Venus, right, they're the cosmic lovers. And in mythology, they were never married. They were just lovers. They were betrothed to other beings, but they still came together with some degree of regularity. But we just had a conjunction in Capricorn, but because that conjunction occurred right after Venus went direct, now she was speeding up and we get this other one. And so it's really unusual that you get two conjunctions, not only in the same year, but 2 weeks apart, roughly.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's a very unusual pairing. And then they're pairing at 0 degrees, 1 minute. I mean, they really could not be more like barely in a sign. It's, which, contrary to how some people think about it, of the concept of cusps, that just in a sign is actually the most potent of the sign. Right? Those first 10 degrees, that first 10 decan of the sign is the most true, the most authentically that sign. And so this is really Aquarian. This is really revolutionary, really innovative. A call to, Venus being what we love, what we value, what we need to feel secure in the world. And then Mars, which is our drive and our action and our ability to be proactive or not, right? Or lack of proactivity. That merging, we are being called to go after what we want, right? Collectively at a global level, and it being in the humanitarian sign, I think we're seeing that all over the news.
Yes. And Aquarius is that community. It's our networking. Whereas the Capricorn is the 10th sign of our social foundations, we could say, our rules and regulations and traditions and so much more. And I'm realizing, as in the sense of awakening, that it doesn't necessarily relate to the Capricorn, although in traditional, they're both ruled by Saturn. Aquarius brings that extra guidance through Uranus, because it is the modern ruler.
Mm-hmm.
And so that awakening stage is first, and this was from a site, just wakeupworld.com, something I printed out some time ago, and I'll just say the bullet points. That first is that there's something more, that realization. Then there's questioning because it doubts, and the consciousness begins to kind of perceive something different. Then there's introspection, the internal, evaluating through, discovering in the self. Then there's resolution through that, which is a spiritual awakening where you begin to experience daily this consciousness. And then lastly, providing one does that, one's actually working in that alignment, connecting with the spiritual prime creator as a channel, so that whatever you express is in tandem with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, if Prometheus had a great legacy here to offer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, for those of us, and one thing to keep in mind, because even though the exact alignment is past, we're still very much in this energy. So you didn't sort of miss out on an opportunity to connect with this energy because it happened, like 15 hours ago. It's still very much part of the day, part of this next couple weeks, probably, of even for yourself sort of assessing, okay, what in your own world, because for all of us, this is playing out somewhere in our natal charts. Are you or are you not going after what you really want? And in a really authentic way, because that has a lot to do with Aquarius as well, right? Is our authenticity, is our unique, authentic self, and how we maintain that within the group, within our tribe, that is that Aquarian energy as well. And it's this balance, right? Part of the challenge in being in the Aquarian age is, how do we navigate maintaining our autonomy and this interconnectedness with humanity?
Yes, it makes, yes. And as you were saying about the two planets that we're talking about, Venus and Mars, I began to think, oh, where are they now in my chart? In other words, not just where they are sitting as a conjunction, but what natally would, because it differs so greatly for us in the countries and the time zones we're in, which we can talk about. But in your personal chart, where does Venus rule? Because there's two signs, Taurus and Libra. In my case, it would be the 8th and the 2nd house. And is that right? No, it'd be the 9th and the 2nd, because they're in conjunct, right? And then for Mars, what would Aries rule, which would be, well, for some, if you look at traditional, it includes Scorpio, but otherwise it would be where Aries is. So it's like those changes are being melded together, those house areas, considering that we look at quadrant houses, are getting refocused into this new awakening of with this 0 degree, the Fool, as we could say in tarot, that just gladly wants to separate and become, that new energy,
which is very Uranian Aquarian energy itself, right? Is that and so not just looking at, okay, well, where the traditional rulership of Venus being Taurus and Scorpio, and so those houses for you, or Leo, or
Taurus
Aries,
and Libra, yeah.
or Aries for Mars,
Right.
But the conjunction, right? Because for me, the conjunction isn't in a house that has anything to do with either of those planets.
Right.
For
Same here.
rulership.
Exactly.
So
Same here.
That's where the conjunction's happening. That's where sort of the power, that's where the jolt, the light of electricity is really happening, right? So for me, it's because of the degree of Aquarius that it is, even though Aquarius rules my third house, 0 degrees Aquarius is in my second.
Oh yeah.
Right. If you don't use whole house.
Exactly.
Systems,
No,
which
using quadrant.
I don't use whole house.
No,
It's not about quadrant. I don't use a whole house system personally, or a whole sign system. But so understanding where that 0 degrees Aquarius falls in your own chart can help you understand where, gives you sort of additional data as to where this piece around your uniqueness and acting upon your unique needs and values, where you're really being called to act upon that. And that there may even be events that make it difficult for you not to, right? It doesn't mean that, that's just the way that it's like, oh, we tend to backburner stuff till if it's not, we don't know how to make it happen, or it feels challenging, and we defer and we defer and we defer. And then the gouds get louder when we don't listen. Right. And then you can't avoid.
It's true. It's true.
But so just rather than having it be something that is fearful, really looking at it, this opportunity of like, you get to go after what you really want for yourself. That's really your unique passion and interest, and how exciting that could be, rather than being fearful of not getting it. Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of times people are so afraid that what they want isn't going to manifest that they don't try.
It is a breakaway, just as the traditional from in ancient times of Saturn that couldn't see beyond. And now we know that there's Uranus, and it's that trust that Uranus is really there, whether we see it or not. And it's going to bring the unknown, that friend of you could even say it's neighboring friend of Neptune that would be further out, because there is that trust factor of kind of leaping across the syntaxes. I often think of that, the two in the brain, all the neurons that actually don't touch. They have to leap from one to the other to make connection. And there is that act of faith almost, that, it just, this, whether it's electromagneticness, and that's why, or the will and everything else involved, because you're right. I'm agreeing that, this area at 0 degrees happens to be in my quadrant 6th house. It's not ruled by that. It's ruled, but it is. No, I'm all mixed up. Yeah, I have 29 degrees, so I get. Pardon me. Yes, it is ruling my 6th house, although it's sitting in my 5th house. That's right. In fact, it's just conjunct my Jupiter. It's making quite a bit of a stir. It's really stirring the pot.
Yeah. So I think, all of that helps us to unpack how we can make the most of this opportunity. And also keeping in mind that Venus is currently morning star. Right. So morning star, she's in the morning star phase, meaning that we don't see, she sets before the sun right now. Right. So we can't see her early evening because the sun is still out, and then she's below the horizon by the time it's dark. So early in the morning, she becomes visible. And when she's in that phase, even the older names for her of phosphorus in the Greek, right? So we have light, right? I mean, you think of phosphorus as the chemical compound, right? Yeah. Phosphorescent lights, right? And Lucifer in the Latin is the bearer of light, bringer of light. So there's this illumination that is happening with this conjunction in this spark of instant aha, that's the Aquarian energy. And then the gift of Mars being there is we get to act upon it instead of having this like epiphany that we do nothing with.
So true.
And go
So
like,
true.
oh, well, that's neat. And then it just sort of falls flat.
Yeah.
And with Mars being there, we get to actually do something that is revolutionary, do something that is human. I mean, what I'm seeing in my circle of friends and community is the rallying around the Ukrainian people and the number of personal friends I know who are doing fundraisers through various other organizations. I mean, it's in the like 20, 25 people right now that I know that are working directly with nonprofit organizations, getting supplies to Ukraine. I have a friend who's on the Polish border right now who flew there Tuesday to work with refugee children. All of that is this kind of energy that we are in with this conjunction of, you know, the woman I know who's in Poland right now, she ran the summer camp I went to as a child. And she's going to be 80 this year. And she flew to Poland essentially on a moment's notice. To her passion, her whole life has been doing international peace work with children. And here she is at almost 80 doing it again on a moment's notice. That's absolutely this part of this conjunction.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Laura. That is beyond striking. To consider this definition that is social, the 11th house, the highest of humanity, to elevate and improve, you know, all the highest alignment of the networking of the community. You know, it's and the opposite, the polarity, you know, with children, the 5th house. It's just
that Leonian polarity.
Yeah, and it does unify us in the sense that, you know, as spoken with earlier, and I'm sure no surprise to a lot of people, you know, we had 2 years of the coronavirus, which is still evident, although with science we have options now, whether it's a shot or whether it's a pill afterwards, but there's masks, there's various ways we're navigating that trauma. But nevertheless, that trauma or that experience has leveled us as a globe into a common experience. And now with Ukraine, as one soul said, it's like a second wound, but yet it is on a different it's more of a physical, right? It's not just this little thing that we can hardly see unless we have a microscope. It's actually in our physicality, something that is unifying the globe through many means. So it's fascinating. Let's talk about our charts. We have a few minutes here before we sign off for the first half hour. Yeah, where in, if you want
so, I mean, so 0 degrees Aquarius, as I was saying, for me, falls in my second. Yes, Aquarius rules my third, but 0 degrees Aquarius is lands in my second. And so I get sort of this added piece about values, right? Because that's what the second house governs, is our personal values, our personal resources. And so and I think part of it for me is assessing, how am I allocating my money? Where am I spending money? Is it lining up with what I want, right? Or are there areas or even new ways of bringing in money, bringing in resources, cultivating resources that are in alignment with my values, right? And how to put that forward, or how to use those, acting upon what I want that's revolutionary, that's innovative, putting those values out there, right? I'm going to teach another section of the myth course that you took last year, starting in April. And I just did an email blast about it, right? As on Friday, and as the Sun Jupiter conjunction was perfecting around then. And so it's this putting my unique values and actions out into the world and how it's tied to my personal values. It's sort of like my values squared, right? In mathematical terms, it's like to the second degree. So it really becomes not degree in astrological language, but, you know, in mathematics, where And so it's this, for personally, this amplification of it being about what I have and what I need and what I want.
Fascinating. And plus the fact, if I might say, that you are an author, you're in the focus. I know you shared with 3 different books that you're considering, and the fact that it's third house, that it rules, it kind of brings that into mind too. It's this whole expansion, because you're a lecturer also. You've done lectures at many conferences, and that's always an option too. So thank you. For me, it rules the 6th house, but it is right in my beginning of my 5th house, conjuncting my Jupiter, which is an apex, the focal point of a yod, significant yod that has to do with all other outer planets. I mean, has between the rulers, stability of Saturn and breakaway Uranus and Venus. So the point being, I'm really recalibrating, redigesting Talk Cosmos. In 2 weeks, on the 20th, will be the 5th season. We'll have completed 4 years, and it's 5 seasons, starting the 5th season. Happens to be Astrology Day on Sunday, the 20th, and this spring equinox, which is always the day of Astrology Day. So as of last year, I'm collaborating with East-West Center, which has 5 in Seattle, which has 5 astrologers, and there'll be 7 of us all together for a panel about Astrology Day. And then following immediately will be an event that they're having with 15 people all across the globe. And so we're partnering with how we're networking this. And it's not quite on their site, which is eastwestbookshop.com, but it will be. So next year we'll get a little spot so that people can join up, and they'll get links for both. And of course, we're always free, and there's a slight charge for theirs. But that's an exciting thing. And I'm totally redoing the website with a new format to make it more easier. And I've changed 2 panels, both of which have worked very hard and done a great job. Cosmic Collaboration for the last 2.5 years, which is now going to be Kaleidoscope Visions. All of a sudden, my tongue wouldn't work. Kaleidoscope Visions. And Moonbeam Team, which has also worked very hard and been very successful as far as its energy with the moons, is now going to be weaving symbols. So they're both in action. And of course, all of this is hammering my daily agenda in ruling, anyways, somehow in there. But it's exciting. Oh, well, I guess that's our focus. Thank you, Laura. Okay. Yeah. Talk Cosmos will return with Planet Buzz March 6th. Thank you for staying with us. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Pisces, ruled modernly by Neptune and by Jupiter in traditional astrology of the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on the equality of all humans and brilliancy, Pisces concludes the 12 signs that energetically encompass the entirety of the universe, where humans have no control. As a mutable water sign represented by 2 fish swimming in opposite directions of the forces of life, we experience in Pisces the collective unconscious energy of the unknown. Intuitive, psychic Pisces completes the seed cycle, initiated with Aries' willful separation from the Piscean womb.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. The show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is John Luke. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars and planets.
Alternative Talk 1150. It's good for what ails you. This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA.
Little humor. I think Aquarius loves humor. Thank you, Laura. And this is Planet Buzz, just for our audience. And we're talking about this conjunction today occurring between Venus, our attractions that rules 2 signs, and Venus, Libra, and Taurus, and also with Mars. You know, we didn't bring up the chart. We have a lovely music. I love it. Maybe we can do that.
Sure.
Yeah, there we go. And what came to mind was you brought up so many wonderful ideas that, because this is a disruption, it's one way to say, like, if we're awakening with this Ho'oponopono here in Hawaii. There was a wonderful Dr. Len who made it infamous across, I think, the consciousness when he worked in a prison promoting.
Psych ward.
Yes, psych ward. Yes, the 4 essential statements. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Thinking of our unity, and that this is not just for the other, but for the self. So what I'm presenting is this idea of who am I and who's in charge, which really does get down to, I was researching and I thought, well, my goodness, that's really something as we're negotiating what you had brought up with these 2 personal planets, that are in these signs. And there's so many ways to begin. I know that you had shared that although every 18 months within 32 years that Venus and Mars, I think, conjunct, what is it, 120 times?
No.
Oh, sorry. I'm mixed up, but only a few in Aquarius, so I'll let you lead.
So what I was researching, so every 32 years, there's 25 Venus-Mars conjunctions. I don't know where you got the hundreds. That doesn't happen multiple times a year.
Okay.
And of those 25 conjunctions, 5 of them are retrograde.
Okay. That's where I got the 5. Gotcha.
And 5 is really significant to think about because in general, 5 is a very important number for Venus, right? 5 has a lot to do with Venus's synodic cycle in general. And it's a sacred number to Venus. So it's a years. Really interesting 5 8-year cycles, right? Is Venus's cycle. And which is when she draws a rose in the sky with her orbit.
Sacred geometry, yes.
And so just thinking about, and every 5th conjunction, regardless of sign, is a retrograde conjunction. So again, we get 5 showing up over and over and over again with this dance between Mars and Venus. And, so because they are conjunct, these 2 bodies with some degree of frequency, like going through every date is not really practical. But looking at their conjunction just in the sign of Aquarius, which is what this one, at 2:12 in the morning here on the East Coast, that has happened with much less regularity, right? So I looked at just dates in the 20th and 21st century. This is the first one this century, right? Not the first conjunction, but the first conjunction in Aquarius. And so the most recent one was December 22nd, 1997. And at that point, the conjunction occurred at 3 degrees, 37 minutes. And it appears pretty much it goes they cycle back and forth with Venus being evening star, morning star. So she was evening star with the last conjunction, which is a different energy than this more initiatory bringing of the light that is this current conjunction in her evening star phase, right? She's really bright at night. We had that last fall, right, where she was brilliantly beautiful. But it's not this returning of the light that is the morning star. It's more she's preparing to go into the underworld, preparing to have a more inner process. And I thought one thing that was interesting to make note of with that particular conjunction was it was within a couple degrees of opposition of Uranus.
Oh, interesting.
Uranus was 6 degrees. That doesn't make sense. Why is it? I don't know. It must have been a different, Uranus wouldn't have been in Leo.
That would be 97. We're talking about 1997.
Must have been a different, I don't know what I was seeing because that doesn't make sense. That doesn't work mathematically.
I could.
But, yes, but so later, there was later ones that I think, or no, I'm sorry, it was conjunct. I was reading it as opposition, it was conjunct. It was conjunct Uranus at 6 degrees Aquarius. So that being really significant, that makes more sense. That's where Uranus was.
And that
in
is
the 90s.
Beautiful, though. Thank you.
So Uranus being at 6 degrees Aquarius for that most recent conjunction, and again, it was at 3 degrees then. So it's only a 3-degree orb. And Uranus governing Aquarius, as we've been talking about, would have made it even more Uranian and Aquarian energy, right? Like I was saying, with it being in my second house, it's sort of Venus squared, that would have made it Uranian squared or more.
And thank you. And it's interesting to remember on your own diary of life, because that happens to be conjunct my part of fortune. And that was an enormous, huge, sudden break from a whole part of life into the latter part of life for me. So yes, I'm avidly listening. So we're at December 22nd, 97.
And about a month later was the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke. Which I think is tied to that conjunction.
Well, it is the cosmic, it's cosmic lovers, but still it was all about
more than values.
But more than that, we have the United States has the South Node at 6 degrees Aquarius.
Yeah.
So it was conjunct that, meaning there is a recalibration. And I'm not one to I admit, I did not persecute our president for that at that time, but it did lend to a lot of opposition and maybe help to separate people into their camps. I'm not sure.
I think where I see it as related is it was a shock around values to the country. And
that's true.
Right? Acting and how people responded, the actions taken or not taken in response to this shock of values.
And it is in the second house for the nation, along with Pluto. I mean, they both are in that house of our sensuality, our finances, our values. I mean, a lot.
So that's what I think that that's as a country, what we valued and the actions and how do we respond to values or this shock of what is valued or not valued or how values are seen, right? And
or whether it made a difference to evaluate the capacity of a president, I suppose, too.
Right. So it's definitely, I think that even though, again, like as I was saying, just because you weren't awake at 2:12 in the morning doesn't mean that you might not have something related to this conjunction manifest in your life.
Good point. Yeah.
And that they can be, often the event is different than the manifestation, right? The conjunction isn't necessarily the moment we see an event that's tied to the conjunction.
No, we have to get away from that instant clicking. I often think of the television where we expect an immediate result, whereas this is a vibrational energy that just shifts and changes, and that takes time to
And it's
work on.
or that the foundation is being set for what might manifest. I think
Yes.
particularly when you're looking at things that are in the earlier degrees.
And these
tends to
were,
be
as
true.
you had said,
3 degrees.
that one was also at 0 degrees, I think.
No, 3 degrees, 37 minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm reading wrong here. Yeah, close. So
and then Uranus was at 6.
Yes, very good.
And so the one prior to that was February 19th, 1992. So that one was at 1 degree, 0 minutes. So we get sort of an inverted from this one that was 0 degrees, 1 minute, that the one that just happened. The one in 92 was 1 degree, 0 minutes. And again, Venus was morning star. So the one in 97, she was evening, she was morning this morning, and she was morning in 92. And some of the other aspects that were going on then that I thought were significant to bring up. So at that point, Chiron was in opposition. That's where I was reading. I went one down before. So Chiron was 4 degrees Leo for that conjunction. And I felt like it was significant to note that during the conjunction, the moon was 15 Virgo and Jupiter was 10 Virgo. And I bring that up because that's the polarity point of Jupiter today and the sun.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
So we were talking and feel free to jump in, Sue. Right. So we have this Sun Jupiter conjunction at 15 Pisces today, and it was in the last day or so that's been going on.
It's fascinating because at that time I was in the midst of going back to college, and I had just completed 2 years, and it was for music. I had a degree in, it was music and for jazz, and also, which I had been involved with, but I thought I'd go back for some certain training, and I wanted to do arranging is what I wanted to do, besides play all these instruments and that I was involved with. And I also did theory, but then I decided at that time to go ahead and get my AA in case I ever wanted to use it for further, 4-year degree. But the point is that that Virgo energy wants to fix something, right? Wants to improve something. And now this energy with Pisces is so much about learning to use talk about awakening, because that's 30 years prior. I was just thinking it's like a Saturn return. Saturn was also at that same point. So this is really that's a milestone if we all went back to 92. And in some, for this particular conjunction, because it's like learning rather than us fixing all this in life, which is important. Otherwise things decay and fall apart. There's need for that, but there's also a need in this awakening process to take in spirit, the source, as our companion and our mentor, in a sense, to recognize what are the signs. I think that's what's really driving me towards using like kaleidoscope visions and weaving symbols. It's like, it's not just us that's at the steering here, So that's fascinating.
Yeah, because I think that, it's these points get re-kicked, right? With this, essentially, we're in the Jupiter opposition of the 2 times ago conjunction, right? Where it's in this it's opposing it in sort of a full moon phase at the same time. And so I think that all this gets interwoven, and I do think we can't really separate, even though it's helpful from a learning perspective to isolate conjunctions. We are a whole chart, right? I don't exist with just my Sun Venus conjunction and I ignore the fact that it squares Pluto, So pairing, even though it's a weird aspect. You know, it's not really an aspect between it's sort of a semi-sextile and a half. That is this Mars-Venus conjunction to the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. It's not really an aspect, right? They're a sign and a half away from each other. Or two signs, it's an odd angle, but that it still has impact. And I think it does potentially, as you were saying, like give it the higher purpose that is that energy. And it is a little, I don't know, wide. I mean, to the Neptune, right? Where that's 7-degree orb.
But Laura, I'm with you, because truly speaking, when we're talking about Pisces, one of the hallmarks is it doesn't have any boundaries. It's those energies beyond our control. And we will leave this chart up for a little bit because people can notice, okay, those Pisces, this is for the United States, it's on the East Coast, because like by the time it gets to Hawaii, it's Gemini rising, or Libra rising rather. So, but here for the nation, the 9th house would be where those Virgo energies would be. So it's really like we're communicating now those needs. And here we are, whereas before it was in our philosophy, our way of sort of our structure, our belief system, like, hey, we've got power, we can do this. Whereas now we're going, oh my gosh, what is in our power? And it's another whole dimension of it. Whereas the conjunction itself is still in self, first house, according to this chart. So I think it is.
Yep.
Am I correct? Yeah.
In this chart, the conjunction for DC, it's in the first.
Yeah. So I think it's potent. At any rate, what are the ones? So you had 92, and those were close, 5 years apart.
So then later, and I didn't get as much into the history of it, but so January 9th, 1966. So, that was Vietnam War in this country. That was the civil rights movement going on in this country, right? That was,
and
LBJ
Pluto
was
and
president.
Uranus, and Uranus and Pluto were conjunct.
And at that point, the one thing I found right around then, which is maybe part of that, was LGB. Lyndon Johnson was saying that we would stay in Vietnam till we won at that point. Right around this conjunction. It didn't happen, but that could be a sort of, and at that point, Venus was retrograde with this conjunction. The preceding ones, or the later ones, the most recent ones to us, both Mars and Venus were direct, but in 66, Venus was retrograde. And that might have been part of like making that declaration with Venus retrograde. It didn't manifest.
And I'm thinking too, at 13 degrees and a half, it's pretty close to that center mark of 15, meaning it's a fixed sign. And people, amazingly, as open-minded as Aquarius is, it can be very fixed. It can be very determined. And so probably thought at that time that this was the idea. But that it's interesting to me to hear how Uranus keeps moving around. First time, like last time, it was conjunct. Then
in 97 it was conjunct, but
this time it's Uranus is conjunct Pluto in Virgo.
Yeah.
So and interestingly, the next time in 97, like you showed that the Jupiter and Neptune were. I mean, Jupiter was, in other words, we were trying to do that fixed energy. And here is the seeding of that. In fact, Rick Tarnas, which if people haven't looked at, there's still time today to connect with his 9 episodes of Changing of the Gods. In other words, his book, Cosmos and Psyche, which is fabulous.
So I think, and keep tethering back to Uranus because of its connection archetypally to Aquarius, right?
Yes,
That they're
that's true.
connected. So the one prior to 1966 was January 24th, 1934. And again, Venus was retrograde. And again, she was morning star. So that's where we were getting this sort of, she keeps flip-flopping back and forth with the conjunctions between being morning star and evening star in Aquarius. And at 21 degrees, 49 minutes. So almost 22 degrees. And, so again, we get this, and that Venus, we even without getting into the specific events that were going on, they're just thinking about what was going on in the world in 1934.
Oh, yeah. The Oklahoma with the Dust Bowl and the Depression economically and resources being
and
broken.
how that gets tied to values and how we act on values.
And did Roosevelt then have the New Deal? When did he
It might have been right around that.
Yeah. And so he therefore brought in, hey, let's find work for people, what they do. He had artists, he had all kinds of people. Wonderful. Yeah. Well,
and then I only went back to the beginning of the 20th century. So then
that's okay.
Beginning of the 20th century, February 7th, 1902, again, Venus is retrograde. 29 degrees, 21 minutes. So almost not Aquarius, almost Pisces.
Did you bring up, and here I'm jumping in, but I happen to know that in 1905, a host of nations, including Norway, and I say that and my father was born in Norway, so it's evident to me, but a bunch of countries broke loose, just like later in the 60s, a bunch of countries broke loose from colonialism. But in 1905, I think Mexico may have too. I'm not sure about that.
I don't know if that would be this conjunction, because that's 3 years different.
No, it is, but I'm just thinking the rippling effect.
Yeah.
I think that in this case, on a mundane level, that one may have been, because it is 29 degrees. It's like,
well, and
right
the other thing, so where I was seeing this pattern of morning, evening, morning, evening, morning, evening, she's combust, or they're both combust.
So the Mars Venus pure.
So the Mars Venus conjunction is combust. She's neither morning star or evening star. Right.
Well,
so combust, meaning that they're rising and setting so close to the sun that we couldn't see either Mars or Venus.
Oh, yes. I see what you mean. We just internalize. It's internalized, it's expressed. And it's so very good, because we only have, I think,
a couple minutes left.
Yeah, about 5 minutes.
Like 3, apparently.
Or 3. Oh, okay. Well, I will say thank you. And we're not quite finished, but just to recap, this is Planet Buzz with Talk Cosmos on March 6th. And I have Dr. Laura Tad and myself, Sue Rose Minahan. And we've been talking about this conjunction today in Aquarius, which is our cosmic lovers, and along with that's in Aquarius. And then of course we have this other conjunction with Pisces that is like dissolving everything, and it's time to fly your freak flag, meaning have that identity awaken to that part of ourselves.
Be yourself, be that unique self, and be proud of being that unique self, right? That's to me what that colloquial phrase means, is be upfront, present yourself as your unique self, however odd and unusual that might be from the cultural conditioning that we may have been brought up in. And to me, the word freak is like, it's a great word. It's not derogatory. It's how we are unique. It's how we are different, how we break the mold, and owning that, honoring that, leading with that, because that's why we're here, right? We're here to contribute to the world in our own unique way. Even if there's parallels and overlaps with other people, there's something unique about each of us. We each have a completely unique chart, right? Yes. And so that uniqueness and letting that shine, honoring that, instead of out of fear of how it will be received, shrinking back and trying to square peg round hole our identity, really leading with our uniqueness. And that's part of what this conjunction sort of ushers us to do, calls us to
It's
do.
beautiful. Yeah, I really thank you, Laura. It's been, oh boy, it is true. Like we're to ask, what are we going forward, and who am I, and be the me and the you. And thank you. I think I can hear myself. Anyway, so next week we'll have the first one of Kaleidoscope Visions, a new start. And thank you. Tune in always, and we're so grateful to have you with us.
Thank you for joining us on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.
The views expressed on this program are those of the